Is it a baby or simply a woman's choice?
The most dangerous place for any baby to be is inside their mother.
This is Bob Boyd.
And Jerry Boyd.
This is Issues in Education. Everyone who cares about human life knows how close we are to ending America's Holocaust on babies.
Miraculously, Melissa Ohden survived a saline abortion, and the Lord had her to live so she could tell about what this country is allowing and testified before Congress. Here is Melissa Ohden, who survived a saline abortion.
897 children will lose their lives to an abortion completed by Planned Parenthood each and every day. Why do I find this horrific? Because I was meant to be one of them. I should have been just another statistic, but by the grace of God, I am more than a statistic. I come here to you today as a wife, a mother, a daughter, a sister, a master's level prepared social worker, and yes, as an abortion survivor. From a botched abortion to the dreaded complication, a child who lives. Saline infusion for an abortion was done, but was unsuccessful. My life was intended to be ended by that abortion. That saline infusion abortion involves injecting a toxic salt solution. For days I soaked in that toxic salt solution, and on the 5th day of the procedure, my biological mother, who was a 19-year-old college student, delivered me after her labor was induced. I should have been delivered dead that day. My maternal grandmother, a nurse, delivered me in this final step of the abortion procedure at St. Luke's Hospital. Unfortunately, I also learned that when my grandmother realized that the abortion had not succeeded in ending my life, she demanded that I be left to die. I met a nurse there who delivered a little boy after a failed saline infusion abortion, and she placed him there in a utility closet in a bucket of formaldehyde to be picked up later as medical waste after he was left there to die. A bucket of formaldehyde in a utility closet was meant to be my fate, yet here I am today, perfectly healthy. I have had contact with 203 of these other survivors. I'm here today to share my story to not only highlight the horror of abortion taking place at Planned Parenthood, but to give a voice to other survivors like me, and most importantly, to give a name, a face, and a voice to the hundreds of thousands of children who will have their lives ended by Planned Parenthood this year alone. As you consider the horrors of what happens at Planned Parenthood each day, I would urge you to remember my story, and Gianna's too. As a fellow American and as a fellow human being, I deserve the same right to life, the same equal protection under the law as each and every one of you. Yet we live in a time where not only do such protections not exist, but my own tax dollars and yours go to fund an organization that has perfected the very thing that was meant to end my life. And this must end.
God spared her life so she could tell us what we're doing in this nation is murdering millions of helpless, innocent little babies inside their mother who will never see the light of day.
Gianna Jessen also survived a hideous saline abortion and miraculously lived and testified before Congress.
Do you think that the taxpayers should fund Planned Parenthood that does harvest body parts of the unborn?
Absolutely not. Margaret Sanger said the most merciful thing that a large family does to one of its infant members is to kill it. That's the woman that began this organization.
As someone who has survived an abortion, can you please tell us how these two descriptions of an abortion procedure make you feel?
It's horrifying to me, absolutely horrifying to hear such things, but I also will never, ever forget watching Dr. Nucatola eat a salad and drink wine, discussing so casually dismemberment of children, and that is it. I will never ever forget that. I find it absolutely appalling that we are even having to conduct such a hearing in the United States of America.
This is a fascinating interview. I mean, have you ever met anybody who survived a late-term saline abortion? Her name is Gianna Jessen. Gianna, please tell us your story.
My biological mother was 17 years old and 7.5 months pregnant. She went in to Planned Parenthood. They said to her, "You're too young to have a baby. You need to go have a late-term abortion." So she did that, and she went and had late-term saline abortion, which is a saline salt solution that's injected into the mother's womb. Then the baby gulps that solution. It burns the baby inside and out. And then she's to deliver a dead baby within 24 hours. And instead of arriving dead, I arrived very much alive by the grace of God. And I laid in the poisonous solution for approximately 18 hours, and I have no burns on my body. I can see, which is miraculous, and I sing, which is miraculous, because I swallowed a solution that burns.
How did you survive this abortion?
The abortionist was not on duty when I arrived, which is the grace of God. Had he been there, he would have ended my life with strangulation, suffocation, or leaving me there to die. But then a nurse was there. She called an ambulance and had me transferred to a hospital, which does not normally happen. It's amazing that I am alive. It is miraculous. They said at that time, and I really believe that God instilled this in me, this baby has an incredible will to live. She does not want to die.
It's not just a choice, it's a baby.
Many people have become hardened. They know now, a lot of them know, that it is a baby, and they don't care. Abortion is legal up until the day of delivery. Many people don't know that, but late-term abortions are extremely common because the bigger the baby in the womb, the more money they ask for an abortion. It's awful what we are allowing in our nation, but I do believe that God can redeem this nation. If God's people will humble themselves and pray, He will be listening to us. I really believe that there's hope for us yet.
I think that you are the voice of the silent scream of all of those other ones that didn't make it, who went through what you went through. God wanted to save you because He wanted a voice to represent all of those unborn children to come forward and say, hey, look, America, this is what you're killing. The pro-life message is not just a religious idea. It's a human rights idea.
Bless the Lord. He gave me a very honest mother who told me the truth about things. And one day she looked at me and she said, you know, because I would run home and I would cry and I would say, Mom, when is God going to heal me? If He's as big as you say that He is, why won't He take this away? She looked at me very tenderly, but honestly, and said, God may never heal you, and He's not required to heal you. That was hard at first, but then as I began, by the grace of God, to accept what God has allowed in my life, there's a scripture that says, those that sow in tears will reap in joy. That's my life.
And that's beautiful, and God loves you, and you feel that. But it just is heartbreaking. You think of all the children in the womb, and their life is snuffed out, and they would have loved to have a chance to live too. You know, it's heartbreaking.
Nearly 55 million babies have been legally slaughtered inside their mothers since the Roe v. Wade decision in 1973. But one survived. Gianna Jessen survived a saline abortion. Gianna Jessen gave one of the most powerful pro-life, life-changing speeches ever given in a speech before the Australian Parliament on the eve of the decriminalisation of abortion in Victoria, Australia.
So I was delivered alive. I should be blind, I should be dead, and yet I'm not. You know what is fantastic vindication is the fact that the abortionist had to sign my birth certificate. I've done some research on the man that performed the abortion on me, and he said, I have aborted over 1 million babies, and I consider it my passion. It is a battle between life and death. What side are you on? So a nurse called an ambulance and had me transferred to a hospital, which is absolutely miraculous. Generally, it was to end the life of an abortion survivor by strangulation, suffocation, leaving the baby there to die, or throwing the baby away. And my mission, ladies and gentlemen, is this: to infuse humanity into a debate that we have just compartmentalized and set on a shelf and said it is an issue. We have removed our emotions. We are becoming harder. Stand up and at least be willing to be hated. You see, I've been hated since conception by so many, and loved by so many more, but most especially by God. I'm His girl. You don't mess with God's girl. I got a sign on my forehead that says, you better be nice to me because my Father runs the world. By this time, I was 17 months old, 32 pounds of dead weight, and diagnosed with what I consider to be the gift of cerebral palsy, which was caused by the lack of oxygen to my brain while I was trying to survive. I am just compelled to say this. If abortion is merely about women's rights, ladies and gentlemen, then what were mine? What were mine? There was not a radical feminist standing up and yelling about how my rights were being violated that day. In fact, my life was being snuffed out in the name of women's rights. I would not have cerebral palsy had I not survived all of this. So when I hear the appalling, disgusting argument that we should have abortions because the child just might be disabled, the horror that fills my heart. Ladies and gentlemen, there are things that you will only be able to learn by the weakest among us. And when you snuff them out, you are the one that loses. The Lord looks after them, but you are the one that will suffer forever. And what arrogance, what absolute arrogance. And it has been an argument for so long that the stronger should dominate the weaker, should determine who lives or dies. The arrogance of that. Don't you realize that you cannot make your own heart beat? Don't you realize that all the power that you think you possess, you really possess none of it? It is the mercy of God that sustains you, even when you hate Him. They said, Gianna will never be anything, which is always encouraging. We forget that God is in control and God has a way of making the most miserable thing beautiful. I have met my biological mother. I have forgiven my biological mother. She's a very broken woman. She came to an event I was having and said, hello, I'm your mother. I was sitting there and I was thinking, I don't belong to you. I belong to Christ. I'm His girl. So no matter what you say, in all your anger and brokenness and rage, it's not mine to carry. And I won't. I was saying all this inside. So ladies and gentlemen, you have an opportunity. I would like to speak directly to the men in this room. Men, you are made to stand up and be men. You are made to defend women and children, not stand by and turn your head when you know murder is occurring and do nothing about it. You are made to be kind and great and stand for something. Because men, listen to me. What sort of people are you going to be? I trust, men, you will rise to the occasion. You are made to defend what is right and good. Now's your moment. What sort of man do you want to be? A man obsessed with your own glory, or a man obsessed with the glory of God? It's time to take a stand. This is your hour. God will assist you. God will be with you. You have the opportunity to glorify and honor God. Some of you might be slightly annoyed that all I keep doing is talking about God and Jesus. But how on earth can I walk about limping through this world and not give all my heart and mind and soul and strength to the Christ who gave me life? So if you think I'm a fool, it's just another jewel in my crown. My whole intent in living here is to make God smile.
Wow, what an incredible message, to make God smile.
Her sole desire is to live to bring pleasure and a smile to God.
What a tear-jerking message from the girl who survived a satanic saline abortion to live to tell us that God is the author of life. Who are we to play God? What arrogance to try to determine who lives and who dies. That's God's job, not ours.
I just love Gianna's passion and her love for Christ. Christ just shines through her and loves through her and speaks through her. She truly is a woman after God's own heart. Here is Dr. Anthony Levatino, who is an obstetrician, who gave this testimony to a congressional subcommittee.
My name is Anthony Levatino. I'm a board-certified obstetrician gynecologist for 33 years. In the early part of my career, I performed over 1,200 abortions. Imagine, if you can, that your patient today is 17 years old. She's been feeling her baby kick for over a month. She's asleep on an operating room table, and you're there to help her with her problem. A second trimester abortion at that stage is a blind procedure. You can't really see anything. Everything has to be done by feel. Picture yourself, if you can, reaching in with this instrument and grasping blindly anything you can, and pull hard. Out comes a leg that big, which you put down on the table next to you. And reach in with this again, and pull hard. Out comes an arm about the same length. And reach in with this again and again, and tear out the spine, the intestines, heart and lungs. You know you did it right if you crush down on the clamp and white material runs out of the cervix. That was the baby's brains. If you had a day like I had a lot of days, sometimes a face comes back and stares back at you. Congratulations. You just successfully performed a second trimester D&E abortion. You just affirmed her right to choose. These procedures are brutal. The idea that abortion is needed to save women's lives. As a faculty member at the Albany Medical College, I have treated hundreds of women with severe problems with their pregnancies that were life-threatening to them. A patient came in at 27 weeks of gestation, blood pressure 220 over 140. This woman is moments or hours away from a stroke. We stabilized her, delivered her. She had a healthy baby in the end, and she did well as well. Abortion would be worthless in that situation. At 27 weeks of gestation, it would have taken at least 3 days to even prepare her to be able to go through the procedure. And this is an important point when we talk about abortion in terms of saving women's lives.
Our guest is Dr. Bernard Nathanson, who operated the largest abortion mill in the world, killing 75,000 babies and helping make abortion legal, is now pro-life and Christian. Dr. Nathanson, what made you decide to begin doing abortions?
Well, when I was a resident in gynecology and obstetrics in New York City in the Harlem area, this goes back to the early 50s, we were seeing so many women who had undergone illegal abortion and were brought into our emergency rooms bleeding in shock and dying. And as a young, idealistic, left-wing ideologue, I resolved to do whatever was in my power to change what I perceived to be a great injustice at that time.
Dr. Nathanson, I've got a personal question for you. Is it true that you aborted your own child?
Yes.
How did you feel about that?
Didn't feel at all.
How do you feel about it now?
It was probably the most heinous crime imaginable.
So have you really repented over your crime?
Well, as you probably know, I was baptized here in New York, and those sins, obviously that was a mortal sin, a terrible sin. Those sins have been washed away.
Well, Dr. Nathanson, you were part of the deception to change our nation, and you fed the media misinformation, which they went along with. And I wonder if we could straighten out the record today. How important are the biased words like anti-abortion instead of pro-life, or pro-choice instead of pro-abortion?
If you use certain terms in the debate and the other side allows you to use them, the debate is over. For example, if you are on the pro-abortion side, on the left liberal side, you will call that euthanasia. The word euthanasia in Greek, it means good death. So if you start arguing euthanasia instead of calling it what it really is, which is physician-assisted suicide or killing of inconvenient people, you're going to lose the debate if you allow the other side to use that term. And I've been pleading with pro-life audiences around the country to use the terms which are accurate and descriptive and not euphemistic.
Would it be pro-death as opposed to pro-life?
Yeah, absolutely. You mean the act of killing? Oh, yeah. Just call it active killing.
Okay.
It's so biased in the media to call pro-lifers anti-abortion. Give me a break.
Or anti-choice.
Yeah, well, anti-choice is ridiculous. I mean, I don't know if you all saw it in the New York Times, but finally one pro-abortionist who heads a coalition of 200 abortion clinics admitted publicly to the press that he had lied about how many of these very late infanticides were being done. Now, I'm speaking of what you and the press call partial birth abortion. Now, these are not abortions. You must understand that. Anything obstetrically that occurs after the 20th week is not an abortion.
What is it?
It's a premature delivery. So what I have gone around the country, again, pleading for is let's call it what it is. This is an induced preterm delivery followed by an infanticide. If you start talking in terms of abortion for this procedure, you lose the game, because then you're in their country.
Right.
And they say, oh, no, abortion's got to be legal and blah. But if you don't call it an abortion, but call it what it really is, infanticide, preterm delivery and infanticide, you're going to win the argument. And everybody shrinks from that.
The words are so important, and that's why the media plays such a major role in this struggle for life.
It's the media, but we pro-lifers have played the game for them. We have all been talking partial birth abortion. Well, there's no such thing.
Because they're partially born.
No, they're not partially. They're totally born. I mean, you've got a piece of the head still within the canal. The entire body is out. To all intents and purposes, this is a delivery, but you can't call it an abortion in any case because it's after 20 weeks, and he admitted they're all done after 20 weeks.
At what point in a baby's life can they really distinguish between different kinds of music?
If you honk an automobile horn on the abdomen of a woman who's 6 months pregnant and have an electronic monitor on her, the baby's heart rate will jump. If you honk it a second time, a minute later, it'll jump a little less. And the third time, if you honk it a minute later, it won't jump at all. The baby really knows how to learn in the uterus.
Well, with the advent of ultrasound, what happened to you?
It wasn't just ultrasound, it was electronic fetal heart monitoring, and just a whole flood of technology hit us in the obstetrical field in the early 70s. And as a result of that technology, it really opened up a window into the womb for me and for others as well. But my reaction after several years of studying and doing clinical research was that this occupant of the uterus was a human being.
So did you quit doing abortions?
Oh, yeah. Quit doing my last abortion, I believe, was in 1978.
I did see the video Silent Scream that you had made. It was powerful because you wanted to do this, that it was made, right?
Yes, that's correct. The whole film rotates around or hinges on a 7-minute segment of ultrasound tape, which I was responsible for.
You want to tell the listeners what happened in that video?
Well, basically, you can see the whole abortion. That was the first time that anyone had ever witnessed what happens in the womb during an abortion. We just let the ultrasound, real-time ultrasound tape run, and you can see the baby being torn apart. First, the bag of water is broken, then the baby torn apart, the limbs flying off, and then you see the torso coming out. And then finally the obstetrician goes in with a pair of steel instruments and crushes the skull and removes it.
Wow, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, it's powerful. It's not as powerful as Eclipse of Reason, our second video. That was even more powerful. That was done on a 19-and-a-half-week pregnancy.
Why is it that these videos showing what really happens in an abortion generate such strong, vociferous reaction from the pro-abortion community?
Well, because they have nothing to counter with, don't you understand? I mean, when I first made the Silent Scream, it was a huge upward step in the technology of the abortion debate. The people on the pro-abortion side denigrated it and called me a liar and all kinds of things. And I kept saying, well, look, if you don't believe me, do it yourself. Take an ultrasound machine, and while you're doing an abortion, just run a tape and show me what you get. I'll believe you. Nobody ever did it.
What about teaching students in public schools about fetal development and maybe show them the Silent Scream?
I think it's a wonderful idea. It's been tried 100,000 times, and every time it's tried, your left-wing liberal ideologues try to block it. The children are too young to see that, but obviously apparently they're not too young to have condoms thrown at them.
Yeah.
Or to have an abortion.
Or to have an abortion.
Well, and they see violence all the time, all kinds of movies and everything.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, now what about it being shown, say, prime time at 8 o'clock nationwide?
We tried that so many times, and the media are basically, the popular media at any rate, I'm talking about network media, are in the hands of the left-wing liberals, the people who are irremediably radicalized. These are the people who are now in their 40s, 50s, and 60s who were the Woodstock Nation in 1969. You see, and now they've come into positions of great influence and responsibility, and they have not changed one iota. Nothing has really changed. They're just in higher positions with more influence.
Yeah, that's scary, although I changed.
Some people have changed, it's true, but for the most part, those people have not changed their minds.
Dr. Nathanson, you're somebody who has really had a miraculous change. You wrote in your book, The Hand of God, you said, I found myself bonding with the unborn.
Yeah.
How did you do that?
Well, if you look at the ultrasound screen long enough and watch enough 12 or 14-week fetuses stick their thumbs in their mouths or roll over or do all kinds of funny things, and they can be quite cute and funny.
Yeah.
Boom. You get the feeling that you're dealing with a real human being, and you are, just in another stage, an earlier stage of development.
Dr. Bernard Nathanson, author of The Hand of God. Here is a hardened atheist who presided over 75,000 abortions. He operated the largest abortion clinic in the world. He helped legalize abortion in America. But now, through God, he's gone full circle to pro-life, and now he's become a Christian. What was was it that persuaded Dr. Nathanson to change? The hand of God. Child killing is a serious offense against the giver of life, God. There are over 1 million innocent children killed inside their mother every year in this country. People never hear their silent screams and rarely see their brutalized remains, but God does. He sees and He hears them.
If you would like a CD copy of today's program, maybe to give to someone else to inform them, please ask for number 1554, Powerful Testimonies on Life, Part 1. That's number 1554, Powerful Testimonies on Life, Part 1. The CD also includes next week's program, Part 2. You can order a CD copy of this program from our website. Our website is issuesineducation.org. That's issuesineducation.org. Or for credit card orders, you can call us at 928-776-0000. That's 928-776-0000. From Jeremiah 1 verse 5. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you came forth out of the womb, I sanctified you, and I ordained you a prophet unto the nations.
How do schools facilitate promiscuity and abortion?
Do abortion clinic owners ever go into public schools to teach sex ed?
This is Bob Boyd.
And Jerry Boyd.
Host of Issues in Education. Our guest is Carol Everett, author of Blood Money, who was a clinic owner that killed 35,000 babies, warns parents that schools can corrupt your child's morals. How do schools facilitate promiscuity and abortion?
Do abortion clinic owners ever go into public schools to teach sex ed?
This is Bob Boyd.
And Jerry Boyd.
This is Issues in Education.
Planned Parenthood is funded with $500 million tax dollars per year. Our guest knows she was an abortion clinic owner whose clinic performed 35,000 abortions.
She actually went into schools to teach sex ed. Can you believe it? Because she knew it would result in promiscuity and pregnancy and increase her abortion clinic business and make her a lot of money.
Her book is called Blood Money.
Our guest is Carol Everett, who is now a Christian and very pro-life, and she's warning parents that your local school could be very dangerous to your child's health.
Carol Everett, we saw videos of Planned Parenthood counselors telling children and teens to go to sex shops and try what we would call perversion. They showed this 15-year-old girl. We heard the lady say to her, "Why don't you go into sex shops and why don't you learn about whipping?" They were suggesting just some awful, odd practices to these young girls.
Perversion.
Yes.
Perversion to these young children. All these deviant sexual behaviors of whipping and beating are sick. What will they be doing next?
And they need to be learning purity of mind, yet they're encouraging them to go to a sex shop. 15-year-old being told stuff she doesn't need to know at all.
Absolutely. What 4-year-old, 7-year-old, 10-year-old needs to learn about sex? There's not one. They need to be thinking about their studies and about having friends and innocent relationships, pure relationships. The thing that's so bad about all of this is once they start that perversion, they start the downhill spiral. And the first time they have sex, do you think they're going to go back to their studies and think about that as first place? No. It's even worse than we imagine.
Planned Parenthood counselors across the country are telling children to experiment with sex using choking, torture, whipping. Call sex ed. I mean, these are not just sexual experimentation. These are actually very harmful practices.
Sexual bondage and sadomasochism and steering them to sex stores to get educated. Come on. What do they need that for? But where is all of this coming from? If any time you hear the word comprehensive sex ed, that's how to have sex. sex. There's a perversion coming into your school districts that you need to watch for. And it sounds innocent, but it is far from innocent. We need to know what's being taught about sex ed. Who wants their child taught this sick stuff? It's all these sick things. Bestiality is the next thing. It's already here. And we're looking the other way while our children are being perverted in all sorts of ways, not just in the health classes.
Okay.
This is an art class.
An art class?
An art class.
What has this got to do with art?
Exactly. It's not art either. Particularly when you're putting those children in a position to access perversion so early. I cannot imagine what their future sex lives would be like.
Well, as I understand it, Planned Parenthood is the largest purveyor of abortion in this country, and they're now using this euphemism. Instead of abortion, it's called voluntary miscarriage. Are you familiar with that?
Oh, yes. And they have this do-your-own abortion kits down in Texas because we made it illegal to dispense RU-486, the chemical abortion, the way they were.
Okay, now tell us the good news.
Texas passed HB2. For 28 years, I had tried to make the standard for abortion clinics the same as surgical facilities and failed. The liberals moved in here hollering, "Hail Satan," yelling filthy, dirty things, and when that happened, God's people came in, and in 14 days, God passed the strongest pro-life law we believe in the nation. It requires that RU-486 must be given according to FDA standards. Abortion clinics can no longer do abortions on babies 20 weeks and over in utero. One portion of our law forces abortionists to have admitting privileges to a hospital within 30 miles of the facility. So far, we've gone from 44 abortion clinics to 24, and then my section of this law requiring abortion clinics to be regulated as ambulatory surgical facilities. We believe we will go from the current 24 to 6 abortion clinics in Texas.
Hallelujah.
Yes, praise the Lord. When God's people showed up, God did. He passed that big law that no one ever thought could pass in 14 days. And what did they do? They came in and prayerfully stood in the government of Texas and prayed. They didn't do anything radical. They didn't carry signs. They just prayed. And God used their presence to make huge changes that are saving lives today. So it can be done. So we've gone from 44 to 6. We're saving 40,000 babies' lives this year simply by regulating the abortion clinics to provide the highest quality of care. So think about that for a minute. They won't take care of the women at all that they're dealing with. But when we force them to, they go away.
What is the chance of having abortion clinics required to have a girl do an ultrasound so that she can see what actually is going on inside of her?
We did that 2 years ago. We saved a lot of lives, that when women see that baby, they say, "My baby," and they flee. So remember, the abortionists don't follow laws. If you tell them just to do a sonogram, they may or may not even let the woman near it. So you have to say she must see it, she must hear the heartbeat, and she must have the ability to ask questions. And even though we have those laws in place, we find that the abortionists routinely violate them every day, refusing to let women see the heartbeat or see the baby. When they do that, women leave the clinics and go to life-affirming centers.
In fact, I heard an interview with a life-affirming center, and they said they had purchased 500 of these ultrasound machines. As a result, it had saved 270,000 babies.
Oh, yes. There are babies' lives saved every day with ultrasound.
Well, in fact, Bernard Nathanson, the man who performed more abortions than just about anybody else in history, I think he had 70,000 abortions in his New York clinic. What changed him was in this ultrasound, he saw the baby. He realized it was a baby, and it changed him. But in 1973, when the U.S. Supreme Court said that they couldn't tell, it was a religious issue. They had all kinds of reasons why they should make abortion legal. To make it safe, they said. But, of course, they didn't know about this Kermit Gosnell, this diabolic, filthy abortion clinic that was just horrendous. But a lot of the media didn't cover that, did they?
No, they didn't. And we had one in Texas that we uncovered, Dr. Carpin. We had employees that gave us pictures of the horrible things they did to babies and the terrible conditions in the clinic. And they released one woman to go home with an IV left in her arm, just horrible things that you cannot imagine. And it really spurred our governor and our lieutenant governor when they saw those horrible pictures.
You know, when they use that euphemism, it's a woman's choice. I always said, choice to do what? Make them fill in the blank, to kill the unborn child, because oftentimes they think it's just a matter of ending a pregnancy or just getting rid of some unwanted tissue. They don't call it a human life.
No, if they called it a life or if they called it a baby, women would flee. But when they call it a product of conception or a glob or a blood clot, they can get away with anything because that just dehumanizes it. There's nothing to it, so get rid of it. Sadly, women want an easy answer when they find themselves in an unplanned pregnancy.
They just want to undo the pregnancy, but what they don't realize realizes they're the mother of a dead child.
Yes, when she conceives, she is already a mother. Women need to understand that. They're looking for that easy out, and if all they find is an abortion salesman, what are they going to do? They're going to buy that abortion.
Planned Parenthood has this new pastoral letter, and they say that Scripture does not say anything for or against abortion. There is nothing in Scripture that says there's anything wrong with abortion. But what about thou shalt not murder? And God loves that baby in your womb, and they're made in God's image, and they're not to be killed. It's very clear. I don't see how they can get around it.
Look at the Ten Commandments. What about Psalm 139, where he says that he knew us from our mother's womb? Our lives were ordained for us before we even were. God has a plan for every baby that's conceived, whether it's conceived in rape, incest, or love, or even outside of marriage. That baby has a life, a future, because God ordained it.
Yeah, people need to realize that at one time that's what they were. They were a single cell inside their mother. It's not just a choice, it's a life.
The sad thing is, here is an atheist, someone who doesn't believe in God, counseling someone who does believe in God.
Sex ed in the schools, they talk about these puritanical, Victorian, strict purists that say you shouldn't have sex before marriage. They really have a way of putting down any kind of morality, really disparaging those of us who do believe in morality.
Yes. Think about it. They never acknowledge our opinion at all. They are the only ones that have an opinion. They actually laugh at our opinions. And as long as they make fun of us, so they laugh at us, they trivialize our beliefs, we're the only people, think about it, Christians are the only people that do not have a right to speak. Muslims, anybody you talk about, atheists and agnostics, and those people who are calling themselves pastors working with Planned Parenthood.
We've been getting an update from Carol Everett, who is now a dedicated pro-life Christian, but before Christ transformed her, Carol Everett was an abortion clinic owner. Listen to her fascinating testimony in this interview we recorded with Carol Everett years ago to let you know she really knows the inside story of sex ed at school and the abortion business. If you owned an abortion clinic, how would you increase your business year after year? Since young women are your customers, where could you reach the majority of them? How about in your local public schools?
Our guest was an abortion clinic owner whose marketing strategy was to go into her public schools to teach sex education in order to increase her abortion business.
Isn't that incredible? Talk about the sex ed teacher from hell. Here she is. As you listen to Carol Everett, think about this. How would you feel if it was your daughter who was taking sex ed from someone who wanted to get your daughter pregnant so they'd need an abortion?
Parents, do you know who's actually teaching sex to your children at school?
Do you know anything about their background or what their real motives are for teaching sex to children? Carol Everett, please give the listeners a bit of your background.
Well, I ran abortion clinics, and the market was the girls, 13 to 18. We actually wanted 3 to 5 pregnancy terminations from her during the ages of 13 and 18, and so we had to break down the natural modesty, get them to laugh at their parents and their values, separate them from their parents, break down the natural modesty, and in order to do that, we did sex education in the schools, and once they laughed with us about their parents, we had the meeting out of our hands. We were the experts. We showed them pornography to break down the natural modesty. We actually used little books with nude models of 6 and 7-year-olds and diagrams.
That was part of your marketing, wasn't it?
That was the biggest part of my marketing, because that was the best part. I could literally count on those girls being in that center the next day.
Well, now why? I mean, what did you tell them that goofed them up so badly?
Well, we told them that sex was safe outside of marriage, and since their parents wouldn't help them become safely sexually active, we would. So come in and we'd give them birth control pills. And Jerry, the sad thing is, we prescribed a low-dose birth control pill that we knew she would get pregnant on. What I just told you is we prescribed a low-dose birth control pill with a high rate of pregnancy designed to be taken accurately at the same time every day, knowing full well no teen does anything at the same time every day. She would become sexually active, the sexual activity would increase, and because the pill didn't work, she would come back to us pregnant.
Well, now, how did you get into public schools? I mean, what did you use as your background? Local abortion provider?
No, we actually told them that we knew that they were having problems with these kids, that these kids were sexually active, and they knew it was a problem, so we needed to teach them how to have safe sex. We all knew and understood that sexual activity was not best for them, but they were going to do it anyway, so let's teach them how to do it right.
Now, is that true? Is it true young people are going to have sex anyway, so they need to learn how to avoid the problems?
We don't take these kids out, get them really good and drunk, and try to teach them how to drive safely drunk.
That's a good point.
Yes, we say don't drink and drive. Now, why in the world would we compromise them in this important area of their sexuality by saying you shouldn't have sex, but since you're going going to here's how to have safe sex. It's a mixed message.
Yeah, that's
You know what-
classic. Carol, can you imagine telling kids we're going to have safe drug use and then hand the kids a hypodermic needle and a cucumber so they can practice shooting up on drugs? We don't say that. Your kids are going to have drugs anyway. Let's teach them how to do it safely.
No, and people who say there's no moral absolutes are making a morally absolute decision. They actually got my 6-year-old granddaughter, and they did what we used to do. We used to put the kids in a circle, go around the room, and say, okay, what do your parents say to call your private parts? Every family in the world has a different name for their private parts, so by the time we reached the 3rd or 4th child, it was clear to those children that their parents simply did not know what they had. But we'd say, okay, boys, this is what you have. Girls, this is what you have. Don't be ashamed. You'd look out on the playground. They were sharing. There they were, breaking down the natural modesty. They went into my 6-year-old granddaughter's classroom, and I didn't know this until I walked in the front door. She was complaining about her brother and sister hitting her private parts. And, of course, those words are red flags to me, so I started talking about what had happened. They had come into her school and taught her about her private parts that week.
Oh, so this is happening all over.
It's happening today. What happened when I was in the abortion business has accelerated. Parents never sign a blanket consent form for their children to be treated for anything without their consent.
Parents, are they aware of this?
No, but they go into churches. They do conferences in churches. They go in and say, hey, we know you're dealing with the sexuality of your children in the youth groups. We know you're struggling with this. Let us help you. The churches, unless they're informed, are open. And they'll go in with pastor's consent and go into the churches and separate the parents from the children, talk to the children about their sexual activity and encourage it.
This is Planned Parenthood going into churches and they're allowing this?
Yes,
Planned
they
Parenthood.
went in. Planned Parenthood knows that their name is a red flag to many people. So we have to start watching for family planners. Remember, anytime these guys get caught, they change their name and go in under a different plan.
Okay, that makes sense because there is an alarm that goes off with Planned Parenthood, but what you're saying is they go under another guise like family planning.
Yes, and the other thing we need to remember is they're still getting over $350 million a year from our tax dollars. What if across this nation we all prayed, God, stop these family planning funds from going in and hurting our children? And what if we just became proactive? What if we started saying to our elected officials, I am tired of my tax dollars paying for something I don't believe in, and I want them to stop paying for ungodly advice for girls and women that gets them pregnant, subjects them to the risk of breast cancer. An abortion increases a woman's risk of breast cancer if she's 18 or under by 50%, if she's 19 or over 30%. Now there are elementary studies showing that a woman who has an abortion has a higher risk of liver, ovarian, and cervical cancer. That with breast cancer, this is a health risk. Why don't we say we want our tax dollars to pay for godly advice, not ungodly advice? What in the world do we have to do to understand that abstinence still works? It says kids don't have sex, and here's why.
I'm just trying to think of how a parent would feel knowing that their little girl came home and she's pregnant, and if you trace it back, it goes back to somebody teaching sex ed at their local school. I mean, how furious would they be knowing that, in your case, you went into the schools purposely to market abortion, to get girls pregnant so they'd have an abortion?
They would all be furious, but they don't know, and that's the problem. They don't know, and they don't think about it. Very few parents really sit down and put the pieces together. The people who come in that teach the safer sex method have an agenda. Sex education sells abortions. I have had an abortion. God uses people like me, for those people listening to us, to say we do not want to hang our heads in shame. Jesus Christ died on the cross for this sin too, and because of that, we can be free and we can educate others as to what's happening.
If you ask the average parent with a child in public school, does your school teach sex ed? They might say, no, there's no class about sex ed in my school because it's been integrated throughout all the subject areas from health to science to home ec to language arts, PE, social studies, integrated so it's much harder to identify, and that's clever on the part of educators to hide it so they can't really point to a sex ed class.
Okay, Carol, what caused you to change? I mean, here you were steeped in the abortion industry. You wanted to make millions off of it, have 5 abortion clinics. What changed you?
Well, I think there's only one thing that can change someone as far gone as I was, and that's Jesus Christ.
But how?
A man felt that God told him there was someone inside this abortion clinic that God wanted out. He took it to his deacons. The deacons prayed with him, and he came into that clinic to share Christ with everyone who would listen. We were trying to expand to become millionaires, and the second time he shared Christ Christ with me. I prayed that prayer to shut that man up, but when I prayed and asked Jesus Christ to come into my life, I went back to the abortion clinic never expecting that prayer to change my life. But when I got back to that abortion clinic, what I saw was those girls were all crying. I'd never seen that before. And so I started taking them back into my office and talking to them about what was going on with them. And so I was confused. And in that confusion, I fell to my knees from the floor of that clinic and prayed, Lord, if there is a Lord, if this is not where you want me, hit me over the head with a 2x4. And it was very swift. Channel 4, the CBS affiliate in Dallas, did an expose on abortion clinics doing abortions on women who were not pregnant. Caught us red-handed and aired a special documenting step-by-step how we attempted to sell abortions to women who were not pregnant. Aired that special 27 days after that pastor said someone would be leaving in 30 days, that it was me, and I left. And I left an angry, hurting, baby-killing, woman-killing woman. 1 out of every 500 of those women had major surgery the last 18 months. 1 died. 35,000 abortions, and as only God can, he sent this couple to disciple me. The couple who led me to Christ discipled me for some part of every day. For 18 months, they were with me every day. My life began to change because they told me what Scripture said. And as we walked through step by step, answering every question in my life and in my heart with Scripture, my life began to change, and I started to deal with the sin, with the 35,000 abortions, and praying 1 John 1:9, if you confess and repent, he is faithful and just to forgive. And the part that's still interesting to me is cleanse me of all unrighteousness, because I'm still in process. I'm a 21-year-old Christian, and he's still working on me.
Me too.
Wow, that's beautiful, Kara. 35,000 abortions. Isn't that incredible? Now, I just wonder, many of those girls that went to your clinic, they weren't even pregnant, but you did an abortion on them anyway, right?
We did an abortion on them anyway because it costs the same amount of money to get a non-pregnant one in as it does a pregnant one.
But that's interesting how they would come in and they didn't know if they're pregnant. They do an ultrasound, say, see that little blob right there? That means you're pregnant. They weren't pregnant at all, but you got the money.
We got the money, and of the women today, 38% are pregnant, 2% have inconclusive tests, and 60% are not pregnant.
60% that are not pregnant that go into an abortion clinic still receive abortions?
We don't know that it's 60%, but we know there's certainly a percentage of women who are walking through the door every day of abortion clinics.
Well, don't they have a little pregnancy test they can get in the drugstore?
Oh, sure, but they're wanting help, and so they believe the abortion clinics are pro-choice, so they call them, not understanding they only sell one product. They go in there, they use a script designed to overcome every objection and make abortion the answer. Those girls are sold abortions, and they buy, and only later to deal with the after effects and the pain and never really know if they were pregnant.
Okay, now why can't we get some law that require abortion clinics to inform the girls?
If these people are killing babies for a living, do we really expect them to follow the laws when no one is looking over their shoulder inside that clinic?
No.
When that girl is going to participate in the cover-up?
Boy, speaking about a cover-up, without the public schools, you would have not had near as many abortions, right?
No, we wouldn't have, but the public schools were oblivious and still are oblivious to what's really going on. They know the girls are getting pregnant. You know, it's interesting, if you go into an area that's underprivileged, you'll see more pregnant girls than you can shake a stick at, but you go into a high-income area and you don't see any pregnancies. Say, okay, so the girls in this area aren't getting pregnant? No, the girls in this area are getting pregnant. They just had the disposable income to go have an abortion without their parents' knowledge or consent.
Boy, that's an interesting thing, because there are many states that allow abortions for minors without informing parents or guardians.
Well, the truth of the matter is, even in the states with parental notice and parental consent, the Supreme Court has deemed that you must have a bypass, but any girl can negotiate within just a week or so to get an abortion without parental consent, even in states where it's required.
This is such a blight on the land, because when you consider Roe v. Wade said abortion is legal, and so we've aborted so many children are dead in this certain age group.
Jerry, if we had not killed over 45 million children, we would not be having a Social Security problem today.
Isn't that the truth?
We have ruined our country in ways we will probably never understand until we get to heaven.
Who knows who we've aborted? I mean, some of these people could have found the cure for cancer, the cure for AIDS, but we may have aborted them.
Sure. Who knows what we've done? But we have certainly aborted a wealth of people.
Well, I think abortion really has caused a scar on the conscience of our nation because it's legal, now people think that it's okay. But it's not okay. Killing children is never okay. It's never okay to do that which is wrong.
No, it is never okay to do that which is wrong, and yet our children have no moral absolutes. Go in your public schools and just sit down and listen. Talk to your children and your grandchildren. It is amazing.
90% of Christian children go to public schools, so we're supporting the public schools by continuing to send our children, our little Christian children there.
Oh, yes, and they say, oh, goodness, well, my grandchildren are supposed to be in the most conservative school districts in the area, but they're still getting all of this garbage. It scares me to death.
For listeners out there who might have their kids in public schools, what should they do, and then how could they get an abstinence-only curriculum in their school?
Well, I think the first thing you do is go to school with 2 or 3. Don't go to school alone. They actually have a program to discredit parents who go in as religious fanatics and go in alone. Take 2 or 3 people with you. Find out what your children are being taught when they're doing sex ed in the schools, and be certain that you rescind any blanket consent form. Exclude reproductive health on there. Be sure that you exclude sex education programs and reproductive health. Get involved. Go to your legislators. Make sure that your state has a law that says you must teach abstinence only. And anytime they are teaching a sex ed class at your school, even if you opt your child out, be sitting in the back of the room, because you will protect those children whose parents don't know what's going on, because they will change. They will change what they're teaching with a parent in the room. I'll tell you, the thing that scares me the most are the girls we see in the crisis pregnancy centers. A 12-year-old who had sex with 20 to 30 men in the month before she got pregnant, didn't know who the father was. The girls submitting themselves to initiation in a gang by having sex with every gang member. Girls in their late 20s and early 30s with full-blown AIDS. We have major problems because these children do not see themselves in God's eyes and actually believe that if they go to a movie or have dinner that they have to have sex with this boy. We see it every day.
Now, you have some resources, books, and videos, things for people?
They're all available on the website, which is HeidiGroup.org.
How do you spell Heidi?
Heidi.
Okay.
Group.org.
Our guest has been the fascinating Carol Everett.
The problem is not teenage pregnancy and disease, but it's a moral and it's a spiritual issue.
Exactly. And one reason young people are involved in immorality is that they can't see that they're sacrificing their future and diminishes the full life God has for us.
Parents, nobody cares about your children as much as you do, so please don't trust their future to sex education in public school. It's too big of a risk.
Look at the risks. You could die from just one sexual experience. Whenever someone says kids are going to have sex anyway, say to them, hey, kids are going to smoke and do drugs, so let's give them some clean needles and cigarettes since they're going to do it anyway. No. Kids can abstain. Here's an excellent example. At San Marcos Junior High in San Diego, when sex ed was taught, 147 girls, that's 25% of the total, got pregnant, and 141 had abortions. But within 2 years, they taught character education and abstinence. Instead of 25% getting pregnant, only 2.5% got pregnant, and that's dramatic proof that kids can learn what we teach them.
If you would like a CD copy of today's program, please ask for number 1555, Powerful Testimonies on Life, Part 2. That's number 1555, Powerful Testimonies on Life, Part 2. The CD also includes last week's program, Part 1. You can order a CD copy of this program from our website. Our website is issuesineducation.org. That's issuesineducation.org. Or for credit card orders, you can call us at 928-776-0000. That's 928-776-0000. From 2 Timothy 2, verse 22. Flee also youthful lusts, but follow righteousness, faith, peace with them that call on the Lord out of a pure heart.